Hello, Garland Nixon here, back with Jamarl Thomas, fresh off of our debut on the Galloway show. And so apparently Trump and Putin are going to talk on Tuesday, and we're going to try to figure this thing out. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here with Jamarl Thomas, and we had a blast. We had a few little. It's the last 24 hours. We got Jamarl on yesterday for to hang out on George Galloway, and we had some issues there. He was in and out, and then this morning I made a video, and I didn't realize that I had my gain turned all the way down. So every 5 minutes it would sound like I was talking with a mouthful of mashed potatoes, like whoa, 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 whoa. Crap! I screwed that one up. But at any rate, today. Well, we're running this on both of our channels. So go to Jamarl's channel if you are a person who you're a subscriber on his channel and not mine, or vice versa. Make sure you're subscribed on both channels, and of course Jamarl's every morning, Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. with the best morning show on the tube. All right, let's roll. Jamarl. Trump's supposed to talk to Putin tomorrow. I got a good thumbnail with a muscular bear and an eagle. Have you seen that? Facing off each other. There's a phone in the middle. And anyway, your thoughts on this? Is it, they've talked before. We've heard so much scuttlebutt every couple of minutes. They're going to talk. Witkoff's there. Somebody's landing in Moscow. We get all of these theatrics. Does it really mean anything? What do you think about this?
I think it does. I mean, the principals are having a conversation. It's not, intermediaries. It's not Witkoff talks to Trump. It's principals. And you can imagine, Witkoff had the conversation when he was in Moscow. Witkoff comes back and say it was positive, even though they're not really disclosing exactly what they were effectively talking about. Trump, being Trump, was like, yeah, we're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about that. The reality of it is they're going to talk about events on the ground in Ukraine. And the fact that Witkoff said it is positive, I strongly suspect it was Putin walking in, swinging dick, feeling very confident about the fact of what's happening on the ground, and said, I need this. Witkoff, take out penny pants, okay, I need this. I suspect they agree on the majority of it, especially around territorial concessions. That was one of the things that apparently they did. Trump disclosed that they were going to talk about. I don't think they mean territorial concessions in the context of Ukraine getting Crimea, Zaporozhye, Donetsk, Lugansk. I don't think it means that. I think it means Russia is keeping the territories that are under its constitution. Now, if there's some wiggle room in that, fair enough. And they may get that wiggle room. But for all intents and purposes, as Putin said, these things are now part of the Russian constitution. They're not going back. When Trump pointed out once before that territorial concessions would need to be made, the term concessions implies Ukraine is going to have to give up territory. And so if that's the conversation that they're having, okay, then we're half the way there. If they've already acknowledged they're not going to be part of NATO, okay, with 75% of the way there. As for demilitarizing Ukraine, well, Russia is doing that now in Kursk and on a 2,000-kilometer front line. So, the fact that Witkoff pointed out the conversations were positive, and then 2 days later, he's talking to Trump, the principals. I would imagine that's not going to look great for Zelensky, who's going rogue, saying we're not giving up territory and all this other stuff. Okay, well, the people who are funding you say you are. I'm going to go with that, considering the last time around when the Istanbul agreements came up, they blew them off entirely because the U.S. effectively told them to blow it off. That's my take on it. Give me yours. What are you thinking this conversation is going to be about?
Well, the first thing I got to think is this. What's interesting is I don't think that Trump and Putin are all that far off, because I don't think, and by the way, listen and let me know if you hear anything weird with I did adjust the gain. So hopefully that's all it was. If you hear anything weird in my audio, let me know. Okay. But I think, it comes back to this, you're talking two people who want a deal. Let's just say you're selling a 2010 Toyota Corolla, and I'm in the market for a 2010 Toyota Corolla, right? When I get there,
Yeah.
and I look, it's in pretty good shape, and you're like, hey, I want whatever, 7,500 for it. And I look and I'm like, that's about what I expected to pay for. You know what I'm saying? You and I, are like, we're almost, the car's as good as sold. I just got to slam the doors a little bit, look at the paperwork. We're there. And I think that's where they are. You know what I mean? Putin's selling a deal. Look, man, I got to have this. And here's why. Trump's people are like, it is existential to them. They're kind of like a superpower and they got nukes like we do. So we really don't want to get in a fight over something that's existential to them and not us. Right. And I really don't like Zelensky anyway. You got to throw that in there. I hate his friggin' guts. Right. Probably worse than the only person that hates Zelensky worse than Putin is Trump. Right. They can probably talk about that forever. I hate that little bastard. Oh, you think you hate him? Let me tell you something. The only thing they'll argue about is who hates Zelensky the worst. Right. And
most of the conversation.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Like
most of the conversation.
30 minutes of a 45-minute call.
That little green suit wearing bastard. I'd like to kill him myself, But I think that they both have the same problem. Mm-hmm. And that is that they want a deal. They know the deal is reasonable and fair. They understand the power dynamic, right? And that who's going to win the war. But they have irrational, unreasonable actors between them. And that is number one. Okay, two. Number one, it's, the Starmers and Macrons. But I think Trump knows he can bully Europe, and he can. Ultimately, he's got enough economic power, first and foremost. And he can always threaten to pull the hell out. You know what I mean? He can threaten. He's got a lot of leverage. He has the most leverage over Europe. Because we sell them a lot of LNG. You know what I mean? There's a lot of stuff. He can really hurt them. So I don't think Trump's worried about Macron and Starmer. He's already talked to Root, tells them this is the direction we're going. So I really don't think I think Trump believes I can bully Europe. They cry all the time. Every time you turn around, there's some European leader crying in Germany at a meeting or something, right? So he ain't scared of them.
Yeah.
But I think they both realize that the people in Kiev are irrational. I was reading this article on the Kiev Post today, and they said, we have 3 red lines. And the red lines are, and it was all the stuff that you're going to have to take. Nobody's going to tell us we can't go into NATO, and we'll never recognize the territories, and nobody's going to tell us what size military we have. And I thought, and nobody's going to have a veto over that stuff. And my position was, depends on what you mean by veto. Do you mean a rhetorical and political veto, or a kinetic veto? Because the reality is Europe and Kiev are talking as though, okay, the Russians can't tell us what to do, but they can do it by force of arms. See, that's the bottom line. In the very beginning, Putin said, President Putin said, we will achieve the goals of the special military operation. If you remember, Macron or somebody called him earlier and said, what about this? He said, we will achieve them either by diplomacy or force of arms. When it comes down to it, in an international dispute between two countries, right? It comes down to, in the end, if they can't agree, who has the superior firepower? Russia has the superior firepower. So I think that's the issue. Does Russia have to use the superior firepower and do this thing by force of arms? And I think you've got 2 people here who are trying to avoid that.
Mm-hmm. Russia has achieved it by force of arms. I mean, just as a flat fact, they have. I mean, look, the reality of it is Ukraine has lost this war. And at this point, I think even the West grudgingly acknowledge it if you push it to them, right? Russia did not get the respect and the level of, let's say, engagement between the US and Russia as they did now. And they would have never gotten it if it wasn't for them winning on the battlefield. I think people need to, lefties, anti-war people like ourselves who don't necessarily like this stuff, and would all things be equal, would rather people come to agreements and deals. On some level, have to accept that, how can I say it? Force is always a backstop to anything, even taxes. When you pay your taxes, if you don't pay your taxes, there will be a man with a gun that will take you to jail or shoot you in the face if you get ornery for not paying them. I'm saying That is the same thing in diplomatic relations when you're dealing with countries and there is no Leviathan above that country. There's no king above any of this. These people settle the stuff at the barrel of a gun. At some point, I hope we get to a better place than that, but that's where we are. And, at the point where the Soviet Union fell, you didn't get respect out of the West for Russia. It was almost as if you lost. This is the end of history. And because this is the end of history and the fact that you lost, your government collapsed, we don't have to respect you. Go back to the beginning of this, where Putin was standing out there like a preacher, begging people to come to Jesus. And they would say, Russia doesn't get security guarantees. Russia doesn't have a sphere of influence. Russia doesn't blah, 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 blah. And then the war happened. And then they lost that war. And then you get Trump begging Putin to let the soldiers out of Kursk. I'm saying the engagement that you're getting is a direct result of them winning on the battlefield. No more, no less. They would have never gotten it if they lost. And so, no, you're absolutely right. The majority of this stuff, I think, is settled. The catch becomes, how do you get the horse to the water and make the horse drink, meaning Ukraine and Europe? And both of them, in order to do this, have a Zelensky problem. You got to get rid of him. He has to go. Like, however Trump needs to do it, by hook or by crook. You remember on the Gong Show where they would have that huge hook and they would drag the guy off stage and the artist would still be trying to move and wiggle and they would still be dragging the guy off stage? That's Zelensky. They are trying to find that hook that is out there waiting for him. Zelensky doesn't see the hook yet, but it's there. And they're trying to fish and get him to drag him off stage. And he's going to be yelling and screaming and shaking and gyrating, and they're going to be pulling him all the way right off stage. That's what they need to do. Because they need somebody to sign that document that's a legal signature saying, we surrender. This is done. We're opening diplomatic relations. We're making whatever deal we're making with Nord Stream. We're doing all this other stuff with Ukraine being in the midst of it. You can do that with the principles where they can agree on general ideas of where they're going to go with any kind of a deal. But you got to get one of them to sign it. UN Security Council got to get it to sign it. And the UN Security Council probably would. Like you pointed out, the US can bully him into doing it. But you got to get him to do it. And Zelensky is a pain in the ass right now.
Well, what's interesting is, and here's the other part of it. The U.S. won't have to bully the UN Security Council. You know what I mean? Russia, China, the U.S. If you look throughout the world, the United States could come up with a deal between Russia and China and put it to the General Assembly. And 99%, how many, if the U.S. and Ukraine came to a finding, because if you're in another country, you don't want the nuclear armed superpowers fighting, because
Right.
the fallout, and I mean that both literally and figuratively, comes down to you. So if the U.S. and Russia sits down and they say, well, you take A and B and blah blah, chat it up, and they say, okay, fair enough, I think I can live with that deal, right? Which is going to lean heavily towards Russia, of course. Not heavily. Russia's going to get everything they want because they won the war, and that's kind of the dynamic. When you win a war, you get it all, right? As one of the people put it in the chat, to the victor goes the spoils, right? And what is that old saying? And the weak suffer. What is it? The weak suffer what they most, and
what is that thing?
And the something, and the strong take what they can, or something, do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must, right?
Yeah.
That's the reality of it. You know what I mean? In the end, this is a strong, powerful country, and they said on our border, this is a bridge too far for us, for the U.S. to come to our border and for NATO to come to our border. So you guys, now we got to fight it out and just see who wins. Okay, well, they won. They can go to the General Assembly. The General Assembly will vote overwhelmingly. Who's going to vote against it other than Ukraine? Even Israel.
They're not going to vote against it. I mean, if you think about it, it was the U.S. that pushed many of those countries in the General Assembly to vote against Russia and some of those other things. And the support got weaker and weaker the further the war went on. You're absolutely
so right. The whole world, the whole global South is going to vote for it. They all support Russia, or even starters, right? So you get this deal. Let's say Trump gets a deal. Now let me go here with you. Trump and Putin sit down and they get a deal, and Putin says, this is what I got to have. And Trump says, okay, you have it. Not that can happen. They may not be able to get a deal, but let's say it happens. At that point, Trump says, hooray, shake hands, brother. We got a deal. Now, and this is something we haven't discussed. Now you got to get the other players on board. And by the other players, I mean Trump has to get the NATO players on board, and I think Trump feels he can do that. Again, as you said, by hook or crook, by force. He'll choke though. He'll, you know what I mean. Those guys ain't the toughest. This is not the toughest crew. You know, this is not the Magnificent Seven he's going up against by any. This is more like, you know, a flock of morons. He'll push them into. He'll beat them into submission. Okay. Putin doesn't have to worry. He won a war. What happens when you say to Kyiv, "Hey guys, let's do it. Here's the deal." No, we're not going to. And you can see that coming. You know what I mean? You can see in Kiev. No, you know, an element of that society, as Dr. Petro talked about, the violent ultranationalists who not only do they believe in fighting to the bitter end, they'll even give their lives for the, you know, they're ready to fight. They ain't going to back. You know, how does Trump sell it? How does Trump push when they sign the deal? What does Trump have to do to deal with Kiev or a deal with Ukraine? Or is it, as you're saying, before he gets any kind of deal, he's got to get the Green Goblin out of the way and get his people in before he even signs the deal?
Yep. Yeah, he does. I mean, because otherwise, look, Putin and Trump, I would not be shocked, I honestly wouldn't, if they have a conversation and Trump says, "Look, I don't give a shit about this. I really don't. But I got to unravel this. And so you're going to hear stuff coming out of us. Don't overreact. I'm going to work it out. This is our deal." And come up with the contours of what they're okay with and what they can both accept. Because whatever Trump gets, he has to sell it. And he has to go, and as you say, sell it to a flock of morons in Europe that are trying to start a third world war. That's aggravating to me. Like, if you think about it, Europe started 2 world wars. And Europe, because of the way that they effectively engaged each other over the course of hundreds of years, kept going with the same nonsense in an industrial era where you can marshal all of the military force. And they brought the world to the brink of oblivion twice. And the morons that are in there now are trying to do it a third time. These goofballs just don't stop. And so it's frustrating to me to have to be in America telling Europe, after we had to save their ass in 2 world wars, to now have to save their ass and prevent a third. It's like, dude, we're the younger group, right? Why are we having to rescue you again from yourselves in the way that we had to do for the last 2 times? He has to sell us. Whatever Trump gets, he has to come out and sell it. Yeah, the world would take it. But it wasn't the world that was fighting. It was Europe that was effectively giving over all of their worth for this nonsense campaign. And now Trump has to come in and say, "All right, I know you damaged yourselves for America. I appreciate that you did that. Thank you very much for the oil money. Thank you for the weapons money. Thank you all that. That's all. We love it. We appreciate it. However, now we need you to not do that. We need you to stop doing that." And the guy who you said was the second coming of Hitler, who was Satan himself incarnate on earth, we need you to now normalize relations with him. Thank you very much. I don't think you can do that on a dime. And so I think you get theater, even if they've already come up with terms of what they're willing to accept. If we look back at the history books, I would not be shocked if 20 years later we read Putin and Trump had already come up with the contours of a deal.
Yeah.
But you had to give it and get the rest of the world, meaning Europe, to go along with it. I wouldn't be shocked at all.
Well, there's another element too, because let's not underestimate the reality that in the United States, there's a pretty nasty element that aligns with Europe, right? There's neocons here. You know, I saw one of Trump's people on Fox News, you know, and we're told that Fox News is they're Trumpy lovers or whatever, right? And the person was basically, they might as well have been on CNN or MSNBC, because it was the blob conversation, you know. Why should we trust Putin? You know what I mean? And then basically the person was saying, we need to get a deal and end the conflict. And whoever the Fox News person was basically saying, I'm going to interpret it this way: we can never get a deal with Putin because we can't trust him. Well, how can we get a deal when we can't trust? You know what I mean? And the person was basically saying, look, if that's the case, we could never, ever get a diplomatic deal with anyone on earth, because we would just say we can't trust anybody. So at some point, you got to put pen to paper and walk away and hope, you know, cross your fingers and hope for the best. But here's my point. notwithstanding the actual content of the conversation, even Fox News is part of that machine that just wants war to continue, that will argue against stopping. Anytime you want to stop a war, hey, there's a war going on, let's stop it. Yeah. There's this machine that comes up with, we can't leave Afghanistan because there's women there. Remember that? We must stay for the women in Afghanistan, the ones that were like blowing their arms and legs off. I don't think they did. I didn't hear the women in Afghanistan say, please help. Right. So but they'll come up with, anytime you try to end a war, they've got some excuse why we shouldn't. And let me add one other thing. And the Democrats, who are going to be in a very difficult position, because most people, especially the longer a war goes on in America, every year it gets less and less popular. People, the longer it goes on, the less people like it. The Democrats are going to be in a position of going bananas, saying, no, you can't end the world. I mean, I'm kind of slip of the tongue, meant the same thing. No, you can't end the war. Is that really a good political position? So Trump versus the elements here, both inside the Beltway blob and, of course, the Democrats.
Every poll that I've ever seen on this, even going during the election, had Trump winning on the issue of foreign policy. And it was because of his framing. He took the position, I don't want these wars. And the Democrats were like, if Donald Trump is against it, then we're for it. Let's keep fighting this war. Let's keep fighting Putin. And it's kind of magical thinking, as if they were going to somehow change the context of events on the ground without starting a third world war, which is what they were effectively on their way to doing. I mean, look, one or two things is true. I can show you the video of Arestovich. And Arestovich points out, he says, we know the pathway to NATO is to fight the Russians, because he fully understood that the moment that Ukraine is going to try to get into NATO, the only way they were going to be able to do it was to win a war. And they lost. Even going back to the William Burns memo, net means net. Well, William Burns, Joe Biden's CIA director, by the way, pointed out, look, Russia does not want to be involved in this, but you're doing this on their border. This is a red line. Effectively, you're going to provoke a civil war that Russia is going to get involved in. A war they don't want to get involved in, but they will do it nonetheless because it is happening on their border. So going all the way back to 2008, they knew where this was headed. And I often ask the question, okay, did they sleepwalk into this where they thought, there's no way the Russians going to invade? Okay, well, why do you have Burns doing that job? If Burns is telling you, dude, this is going to start a war, if you didn't believe Burns. And everything that Burns has said up to this point has come to pass, even up to the point of the Civil War that Russia got involved in. So they knew where this was going. And it's either they sleptwalk into it, where there's no way the Russians are going to defend their existential situation, or they did it on purpose. Both of those things are bad. Both of those things are horrendous, especially if you look at the outcome of what has just taken place with this kind of war. You're right. Though Trump has bent people in the form. Marco Rubio is not the guy who he is now. Right? Like, that is not who Marco Rubio is. That is the role, however, that Marco Rubio is playing, because Donald Trump has bent them into form. And the Republican Party is seeing that, okay, this stuff apparently works with the American public. Fair enough. Trump wants it. We're not going to go against Trump. So we will be quiet about this. But we don't like this. This is not a norm for the Republican Party, just like it's not normal for the Democratic Party either, if this was a position that the Democratic leader would take. You're right. Fox News, they don't like it. But they will follow course because Trump is pushing it. And if Vance became president, they would follow course because Vance won also and became president. But this is not who they are. We should have no mistakes about that. This is not who they are. This is not what they want. Any random blue moon, you're going to have somebody on Fox come up and go off script, which sounds like what happened.
Yeah. I think that the situation we're in now is everybody's looking at this through the same lens. And that is, in order for Trump and Putin to do what they need to do, they have to eliminate what's in the way, and that's Zelensky, who's irrational. I think that's anybody looking at that has to listen to Zelensky and say he's fussed and he argued with Trump. He went to Saudi Arabia and they wouldn't let him in the meeting, so he's already on the outside looking in. I mean, he's outside the window with his face mushed against the glass, rap on the glass and all that. tapping on the glass. I'm here. You know, they pull the window shade down on it. Exactly. No, you're out there, buddy. And when I read that article in the Kiev Post, because it said there's certain red lines that won't be with it. And see, this is how irrational we are. There's certain red lines that won't be crossed. One of them was no one tells us what international organizations that we can join, including the EU and NATO. There's one problem here. Here's the problem. Now, this is how irrational it is. Donald Trump, who pretty much U.S. is in charge of NATO, said it's over. They ain't joining NATO. The other day, he said, yeah, we've known that for 40 years.
Yep.
The president of NATO, or whatever you call him, general, whoever this guy is, Mark Rutte, he leaves the other day. He says, yeah, that's pretty much off the table. They ain't joining NATO. Okay. So the guy who runs the country that funds NATO says NATO's off the table. The guy who's the general, whatever you call him, of NATO, the guy in charge of NATO says NATO's off the table. Neither one of those are Russians. Neither one of those work for Vladimir Putin. This is the power, the real power behind NATO says Ukraine ain't getting in NATO. And Ukraine says nobody's going to tell us that we can't join NATO. And I'm thinking, not even NATO?
Right. Right.
You know,
NATO that you can't join NATO. Right.
Exactly. It's like, well, I guess you're going to go to have to war with NATO now, because the implication was we won't make that deal with Russia because Russia will not tell us we can't join NATO. The problem is NATO is telling you can't join NATO. Right. So you're at war with Russia. And I guess you're at war with NATO, philosophically speaking. But actually, here's the way I read it. Even if we get a deal, we won't sign it because eventually we plan to join NATO in the future, maybe after Trump's gone. You know what I mean? So we're not going to sign something that says we'll never join NATO. But the reality is this. When the Russians finish with Kursk, that's something we'll have to touch on in a minute, and they come on into the Sumy region, there's a flat-out highway going right to Kiev. Straight to Kiev. All they got to do is get on the road. They don't have to pass go. They don't have to collect $200. They don't have to turn on their blinkers. They can get in a self-driving Tesla if they want to and take a nap. Straight to Kiev. They know they've been there before. They know how to get there. Former capital of Russia, wasn't hundreds and hundreds of years ago. They're very familiar with the territory. So if you're saying to them, to me, here's what I hear. You're going to have to take the government down. That's what they're saying. Look, because if you say it's basically over my dead body, nope, we'll never agree to it. Well, you're going to lose the war. Well, here's what I hear from them. Well, we're going to have to lose the war. So I don't know. I think it all comes back to. I think it does all come back to. There's plans afoot to replace Zelensky and his government with a more compliant government. That's why Trump is saying they may be waiting for the deal. What he may be saying is, we're not going to install this government till we get the final go-ahead for the deal. You know what I mean? Yeah. We're going to talk to Putin. Witkoff has talked to Putin. Trump's going to talk to Putin. Hey, you good with this? We're good with that. We'll take it. Ready? Okay, great. We good? Yeah. This is the final yeses. Okay, great. He hangs up the phone and he calls his boys. Move on Zelensky now. We have our government, if somebody grabs Zelensky, he's got a sweater over his head and his hands like they're taking somebody out of a crack house or something, or, when they arrest somebody, they're going to bring him out of his, out of there, cart him away, install the new government. And then when that new government's installed, whoever is there, could be Arestovich, could be anybody, is ready to put his John Hancock on the dotted line. I think that's where we are. So let me ask you this. In order for that to happen, something else has to be dealt with. Kursk. Are the Russians sitting on Kursk? Now, here's the thing. They got the people surrounded. Are they sitting on it because it gives them leverage? Or are they just saying, we don't have to blow them up today? What do you think's going on with Kursk? Because they said, hey, we're going to kill them all today if you don't act.
Well, Putin gave them, 2 days? All right.
It's supposed to be the day, I thought. What do you think happens with Kursk?
Yeah, Putin gave them 2 days. I mean, Ukraine is still saying they're fighting. They're still trying to hold the land, which is mind-blowing to me. Maybe, I suspect Medvedev is going to be right. I don't think they're joking. These people are invaders from their point of view. Well, not just from their point of view, they're literally invaders. And so, they have been killing 67,000 what does another 5, 10,000 make in that case? And I don't mean to be brutal. I know this sounds horrible because we're talking about human life, but I'm talking about the realities of military service, military action. They have killed 67,000 Ukrainians that invaded in Kursk. They've blown up all sorts of machinery. What is the difference with another 5,000 people and X amount of machinery and materials? They're going to kill them all unless they surrender. I believe them to the fullest extent of believing somebody when they say, we will kill all of you if you don't surrender. That is the situation to which those troops are in. Now, if Donald Trump has a conversation and the conversation results in something else, that will be shocking. But they will be talking, so who knows what's going to come up. But I strongly suspect that the plan is we're going to kill all of those troops. Because the problem is, what do you do if you can't let them just walk back and resume military service against your country? And if you come up with some kind of quote unquote ceasefire, okay, same situation. If the ceasefire is not set up to lead to this kind of long-term sustainable peace for Europe, then there's no point in the ceasefire, and it's not necessarily going to be paid attention to. So those people are going to die, or those people are going to surrender. I have a hard time believing that they will be just let out. I don't buy that. I just don't buy that premise. I don't think Russia would buy it. I don't think they would do it. I don't even think they're going to engage in any kind of ceasefire talks if those ceasefire talks don't lead to a large sustainable peace for Europe. I think they're going to pursue their military objectives in order to put more pressure on the negotiations, whatever those negotiations are. We'll talk to you as we go about our campaigns. Nothing is going to happen peace talk wise until Kursk is liberated, because Kursk is not going to be part of the negotiations. So we'll see. Putin gave him 2 days. Today was the day that operations, I guess, were going to resume from the standpoint of the encirclement. I suspect more pressure is going to be applied to the people who are there, because they still, I would imagine, they still have equipment. So them being encircled is not the same thing as them being eliminated. And so they probably can put up resistance on some level. But I get the sense that those people are going to they're going to have a bad day. They're going to have a very bad day.
Yeah, I think you're right. Let's look at this. CNN poll, Democratic Party's favorability drops
29%.
to a record low. We can look down here. Let's look out. Go through all of these. Look, you notice they'll go to all these numbers. Democrats, the line say 57 to 40% said but they go through all these numbers, and you keep looking along, and sooner or later you get to this. Among the American public overall, the Democrats' favorability stands at just 29%. A record low in CNN's polling dating back to 1992, a drop of 20 points in January 2021. Now, I suspect some of it right now, they're pissed at Schumer. They're pissed at, here's what's interesting. The Democrats felt like, okay, I think this is me projecting onto them. Well, Trump's in, so now he's going to do terrible things and everybody will love us and they'll come back to us, right? When in reality, what seems to be happening is they're getting really pissed at you saying, well, you're not even fighting against his crap. You know what I mean? It's like nothing's working out for the Democrats. Your thoughts on what this means, and especially in light of they did the performative crap at Trump's faux State of the whatever union, his State of the Union semi kind of meeting. And, they're shaking their canes and stuff like that. That wasn't a good look. The fact that you got to shake a cane at somebody makes you look old and decrepit. There's a lot of, I'd have had like a young guy going, "Oh, kick your ass," a bodybuilder or something, instead of some old guy shaking his cane. You old little whippersnapper, you, and off it goes, But my point being, 29%, dude, and I don't see it. It's not trending up. Show you say,
but what would be there for it to trend up? And I'm being honest. I'm just asking an honest question, right? What is it where you would be like, yeah, they're doing phenomenal work? What is? I don't know what would be there. I mean, the performative stuff with Chuck Schumer. Oh God, the Chuck Schumer thing is humiliating. Just hit on that for a moment.
Yeah. It's for those people who don't know the deal. Give them the kind of briefly the details on Schumer.
So the Democrats, they were trying to get a budget out, continuing resolution that would keep the government funded, I think, going out to like October. Democrats were against it because they said it gave Trump too much power to move money around in the directions that he wanted to move it, take it from stuff where put it at spot, because the language in the continuing resolution was somewhat vague. They're probably right. So they were like, we're outraged. We're not going to accept this. The House was like in an uproar saying, kill the bill, kill the bill. And Chuck Schumer had the ability to kill it or let it go through. Chuck Schumer said, I'm going to kill it. I'm going to kill it. We're going to shut the government down. We're going to shut the government down. And he kept saying it over and over. When really, behind the scenes, he was saying, there's no way we can shut the government down. This is not going to work. We can't do this. This is not going to play out well for us. We're going to get blamed. We're going to get blamed. It became that. And so finally, you got the moment where Chuck Schumer goes to the podium in the Senate. He stands up and he completely capitulates. Right? In man, like out of the blue, he comes out and just like, we can't do it. It's not a good thing to do for Democrats. It's not a good thing to do for the country. So I am completely capitulating on everything that I said for the previous 2 weeks. I failed miserably in my role as Chuck Schumer. It's humiliating. And it's so humiliating that Democrats apparently were in an uproar over Chuck Schumer not shutting the government down. So, people could take issue with, and people took issue with two things. One, why lie and say you were going to do it? And two, why didn't you do it? And how could anybody take you seriously if you, meaning, I forget the show, but he made the point of saying, if you make a threat, you got to go through with it, almost like a robot, because if you don't, nobody takes you seriously. It's that. Nobody takes you seriously. Nobody knows what you are. Nobody knows what you represent. And it comes across as if you're only reflexive in opposition to Trump. You yourself don't represent anything short of being, as you pointed, part of a cult that is a money laundering operation. What would anybody see that would give them even the 29%? I'm shocked at the 29%. I'm not shocked at the other ones who say, I don't see anything here. Those people are rational actors. It's the 29% was like, okay, what are you looking at? What are you seeing? What is giving you this inspired view where you're like, yes, we are backing this party? I'm shocked at those, not the others.
Here's something that, again, it goes back to what we're talking about. MSNBC.
Oh.
On Russia, Trump rejects public attitudes and takes new Kremlin-aligned steps, right? So they go on to, what do you know, an NBC News poll, only 2% of Americans in an NBC News poll sided with Vladimir Putin's regime, while 61% chose allies with the Nazis, right? And they go on, 49% said they believe Republican president is sympathetic to Moscow, whatever that means, right? So they're talking about, and if you think about it, I cannot recall a moment in history when American public opinion and voters' views of the president as to which country they are more aligned with have been in more conflict with each other. Here's the problem. You're playing into Donald Trump's hands, because what does Donald Trump keep saying? I'm looking out for America's interests. Now, I don't agree with Donald Trump on most policies, but if you and I are serious geopolitical analysts, right? And we understand that if you're the president of Iceland, as an example, whatever, name a country, Denmark, your job is to look out for the interests of Denmark. If you're the president of whatever, right? So when they say, the Democrats say he's aligned with, Americans are more concerned who he's aligned with. Actually, most people are like, well, let's look at the problems here in America. I would argue that those comments about who he's aligned with, right? Kremlin aligned steps, that's what caused them to lose. So what do they got? Well, you can't see it now, but they had a picture of Putin, a picture of Zelensky, and a picture of Trump at the top, right? So when the rhetoric that they're using is rhetoric that says there's these other two countries and we will judge you, our cult, as what the Democratic Party has become, our cult judges you or whether you're pro-Kremlin or pro-Ukraine. And the majority of Americans are judging you of whether you're pro-American or pro-whatever else. And by pro-American, now we can talk about that. We've got an idea of pro-American that says, look out for the working class, right? These people in charge now feel like we got to take Greenland and Canada and we got to expand our empire a certain way and we've got to shift resources from Europe to China. Okay, that's their idea of pro-American, and it ain't ours. But my point is, it is a very unhealthy conversation that the Democratic Party is having. And when you see these kind of discussions in polls, you say, and you don't understand why that's what's getting you down to 29%.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
How do
Your thought.
how do you allow a political party to take the framing that they're America first? Like I saw this in the UK election with Jeremy Corbyn. I love Jeremy Corbyn, love the guy, but there's something wrong with weak lefties that just doesn't work. It's I don't know if they're too moral, too ethical, and that's sad to say. I don't know what it is. Jeremy Corbyn, who was Eurosceptic, by the way, just so people to know, Jeremy Corbyn was a Eurosceptic. Jeremy Corbyn wasn't able to say he was a Eurosceptic, and not just not able to say he was Eurosceptic. They were working behind the scenes against him. His own party was putting a knife in him because he, similar to Sanders, was taking a very hardcore left-wing agenda, at least in the context of the British political system
Right.
At the time. And Boris Johnson took this position that I believe in freedom because I'm going to follow the Brexit referendum. And Jeremy Corbyn couldn't say he was for Brexit, despite the fact that he was a Eurosceptic. And his own party hobbled him when he ran in the race. So they ran on healthcare, where Boris Johnson ran on freedom.
Mm-hmm.
I am freedom itself. I am the living embodiment of freedom because I am going to fulfill the referendum. How on earth do you let a political party take that framing unopposed and beat you over? I am America first. I am functioning for America's best interest. That's what I'm doing. My name is Donald Trump. That is a hell of a framing to have to fight against. Now, whether he believes it or not, doesn't matter. It's unopposed. Like, it's a point of view of I am fighting for the working class. It's kind of like that. Well, that is a very difficult point of view if you can take it and you can frame yourself in that way. The rub is that was FDR, that was LBJ. Those were Democrats. The big society or the New Deal. These were things that gave the Democratic Party itself a certain framing in regards to what they were for 50 years or more. And they lost it to Trump, a billionaire, working with another billionaire to destroy federal institutions. That's pretty mind-blowing. Like, well, at least I see it as mind-blowing in that context. That they lost the mantle for the working class to a guy that is screaming that he's fighting for America. And they have no response, no retort, no cohesion. If you ask somebody, what does the Democratic Party stand for? How would they have an honest answer to that question? That is, I think, where they fail. It's not just a messaging issue. It's a reality issue. You have to actually be something now. It's like, okay, you lived off that reputation for 50, 60, 70 years. Good job. Okay, you've lost that reputation. What do you do to get it back? I guess my thing is, do you see any awareness of this at all? I don't see any awareness of this coming out of the party.
Well, after Trump's faux State of the Union address, the woman that gave the retort was Elizabeth Slotkin, who's former CIA agent. And she talked about, yes, we need to be more like Reagan. Democratic Party needs to be more like Reagan. And they have a former CIA person giving their retort to Trump. See, so they have become, well, I'll put it like this. If you think about it, the only real solid policy, if you ask me what the Democrats stand for right now, what is their foundation right now? The only thing I can think of is Ukraine anti-Putin, not anti-Russia, because Russia doesn't exist. It's just Putin as far as their rhetoric is concerned. Other than we've got to stand with Ukraine and Zelensky against the evil Putin, I can't really look at a policy and say that's what they're for. Are they for healthcare? No, not really. Are they for something to do with the working class? They're reflexively opposed to Trump, meaning they're not opposed to any specific policy. there is any specific policy they could support or oppose depending on whether Trump did. The only thing they need to know, if you say there's a new policy, Democrats, what do you think of it? The only thing they need to say is, how does Trump feel? And when you say, well, Trump opposes it, we're for it. Oh, wait a minute, Trump's for it, then we oppose it. So there's not even a real party there. It is an anti-Trump cult. It's very much a pro-war cult. Are they standing up against Trump for deporting people or censorship? No, because they're pro-censorship. You know, the worst parts of Donald Trump's policies, they don't push against him, because those are the ones they agree on. And they don't seem real upset that he's firing, you know, people at the Department of Agriculture and, you know, stuff like just plain old people that work in an office day to day. It's like, hey, we're going to get rid of all these working class people and fire them and send them home to struggle and not be able to pay their bills. Hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. And as I've said to people, they say, yeah, we got to get rid of all of this wasted money in the government. And I say, when they fire these people from the Department of Agriculture, you ain't getting that money back. That money will then be moved over to build extra aircraft carriers, build extra planes, to fix the nuclear weapon, upgrade the nuclear weapons. They're going to fire everyday people, soccer moms and soccer dads. They're going to fire them, and they're going to take whatever savings they have, which ain't going to be much, because federal government salaries are 6% of the federal government. So let's say they knock out, you know, 25% of that. So they knock off, you know, what, 1.5% to, you know, 2%, maybe max 1.5%, 2% of the federal government. They ain't stopping that. Any extra money, the military industrial complex is going to be sitting there saying, how can we get our hands? I will guarantee you all the crap Donald Trump has said about lowering the Pentagon budget will go up by many, many times more than the amount that they save from firing soccer moms and soccer dads who work for the Department of Agriculture.
Agreed.
But the Democrats ain't mad about that. Now, if Trump really wanted to infuriate the Democrats, you let him try to cut the Pentagon budget. Then he's got a fight on his hands. You know what I mean? The one thing if he says, well, I think we need to cut 8% from the Pentagon budget, the Democrats will go ballistic. They'll go apeshit on him. So they don't have, if you want to be the party of the working class, don't you have to have some foundational policies that the working class will want to clamp on? And like, you want to take them, you want to get them on that train, you got to open the door and say, there's things for you on this train. There ain't nothing for them on that train except to get mad at you because you didn't vote for them. That's about the best they can do.
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, the Pentagon budget went up $8 billion in its continuing resolution, something like that, if I'm not mistaken, if I remember it right. Foundational policy is getting back to basics. It's like, okay, where did we go awry? Where did we go wrong? But they seem to have taken the wrong lessons, because what they would say is, okay, well, these lefty policies are too much. It's like, okay, well, what are lefty policies? Well, it seems that the population doesn't like, trans people playing women's sports, or trans men playing in women's sports. It's like, okay, but that's not really a lefty policy that we're talking about. Like, what we're talking about is economic populism. And they've somehow redefined wokeness as lefty, which misses the boat entirely. When we're talking about this stuff, we're talking about increasing minimum wage. We're talking about effectively putting more money into people's pockets. Medicare for all, like, policies that will directly impact the populations in regards to their economic well-being. I give you one example. When Joe Biden was running, and Joe Biden said, okay, well, we're going to give $300 to moms to help raise their kids. Great. And then they got rid of it within the first year, less than a year, gone. It's like, okay, that was a good policy. I mean, if you put money into people's pockets, they will remember the fact that you put money into their pockets. Whether it's through healthcare, whether it's through a minimum wage increase, however you do it, they will care. Whether it's an increase to Social Security or Medicare, whatever it is, they will care. There's a reason why Social Security can't be touched in real terms, so it can't be touched directly. There's a reason why Medicare can't be touched directly, because those things had direct impact in the way the population felt. And they gave it to Democrats because Democrats were the ones that provided it. somewhere they've gone awry. The notion that you say Reagan, the guy who wanted to destroy, like, I want to drown government in a bathtub, that guy, it's not the guy to emulate as a Democrat. They've gone awry. And so, yeah, it's not just, oh my God, I'm pointing to that's bad. It's also having some substance, that some definition, where when people say, what do you represent? I represent this, this, and this. You want to be on this train? This is what we're trying to do. And to not just say it, but to mean it. It's that part. FDR meant it. LBJ meant it. LBJ might have effed up in regards to the Vietnam War when he, what Martin Luther King said, the Great Society hit his head on the shores of Vietnam, something like that. Yeah, but that's what they wanted to do. That's what they believed in real terms, and tried to do it. And as Stephen A. Smith pointed out, it's not what you say, it's what you're doing. And you may say something, but in no terms did you really mean it. The issue is the meaning. It's missing. And because it's missing, people can see that it's missing. You can't even hide it anymore. You can't even shuck and jive in the way you could prior, in order to kind of, pretend as if this is what we represent, as you went about not representing those things. Substance is missing. And I think they've gotten so accustomed to just going that way that they think, oh, we just need better messaging. It's not the messaging. It's not the messaging.
Before we go, I did want to ask you this. To comment on something else on the Houthi strikes. Tell you why. One of the things that I've said about Trump, I said, is this. And this is obvious. In a way, he's the perfect guy to run the U.S. empire for this reason, because he has very poor conflict resolution skills. It's obvious that Donald Trump only understands, do what I want or I'll hit you over the head with a blunt object. You know what I mean? The so-called carrot and the stick, which makes no sense anyway. I'm going to offer you a piece of candy to do something. But if you don't do it, then I'm going to take out a baseball bat and beat you until you do it, right? Well, that's not really the carrot and the stick. That's the appearance of a reward. Only if I'll give you a carrot. That's not a reward, because if it was a reward, that means that I have the option of taking it. And if I say no, that you're not going to use violence against me. The only thing Trump knows is try to ask somebody to do it. And if they don't, you try to force them. In fact, I read something that says, yes, the White House says that if Trump's not able to work things out with Vladimir Putin, that they may go with more sanctions. And as we keep saying, let's see, you got 25,000 sanctions. You think 25,001 that'll be the straw that broke the camel's back? Not happening, right? But I don't know if Trump's people are that stupid, or if they have to say that again for the Beltway to keep them off their back, or if they really stupid enough to say, well, if Putin doesn't do what we want, they've got no leverage. So we're going to pretend as though we got leverage with more sanctions. You know what I mean? But at any rate, here's my point. So now he goes and bombs the Yemen, Ansar Allah. Well, here, what do we know about them? They believe that they're doing God's work to protect the Palestinians, that it is their duty from Allah. They also believe that the greatest gift, the greatest honor that could be bestowed upon them on this mortal plane is to die doing God's work. Trust me when I tell you this, bombing Ansar Allah is not going to stop them. They're like, hey, they got bombed, and today they had like 1.5 million people in the streets. Yeah. When you bomb them and people die, the people come out to celebrate. Look at what blessings Allah has given us to be allowed to die on behalf of this glorious, look at the glorious martyrs and the glorious, and they got, oh my gosh. And I'm thinking, all you know how to do is do this. Meanwhile, you got a lot of people that voted for Trump saying, shit, man, I didn't vote for this. Yeah. You told me, judge me by the wars I stop and all this crap. They're like so tired of Biden bombing everybody that it's like, it's not a good look. Your thought on Trump bombing Ansar Allah on Yemen?
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think any mom that loses a child feels for that child, even if the child is a martyr. I think any society misses those people. I think they may accept this notion of giving their life for some kind of greater cause. But again, I think loss is loss, right? what they want is admirable, right? We want to stop the war. Nobody else is helping the Palestinians, so we will step up to do it. Keep in mind, this is a country where they've been bombed by Saudi Arabia for like 8 years before we even got around to doing the bombing ourselves. And at no point did Saudi Arabia stop them after all of the bombing that took place for all of those years. I don't believe for a moment that we're going to put troops on the ground. Who knows? But I don't think that's going to happen. So the best you got is bombing that is somewhat ineffective, because what you're killing is effectively civilians. You're not necessarily hitting the people who are doing the bombing per se.
They don't have any infrastructure. How about that? You can't bomb their infrastructure. They're poor. They don't have infrastructure. And what little they had, the Saudis have already bombed. So you're bombing. What are you really doing?
It's like, what are you bombing at that point, right? I mean, many of the people you're killing are just women and children. And so good luck with that. You're putting your own carriers at risk, because they do have missiles and they do have the capability to bomb back, even though they haven't necessarily been able to take down a carrier up to this point. The issue is the war. And, stop the war. You stop them from doing what they're doing in regards to the Red Sea. Now, to be fair, Trump at one point apparently had an envoy that was reaching out and talking to Hamas. Israel found out, didn't like it, and outed the fact that he was talking to Hamas. And apparently they got rid of the person who was doing so. So Trump's instincts seem to be, let's make a deal. Even if I have to go around Israel, and maybe he knows that Israel is not on board for the deal. In the way you look at it, though, this is an Israel first president. And as an Israel first president, we will bomb the Houthis on behalf of Israel, as opposed to making a just deal in that war. Something that
and threaten Iran. And they're threatening Iran. We'll hold Iran responsible and blah, blah. And Iran's like, I don't want to fight, but if you fire at us, it's going down. And that would be disastrous for Trump.
Oh, that would kill any notion of Trump getting a Nobel Peace Prize. Iran is 3 times the size of Iraq. And so what are you doing? It's not like in that situation. You're not putting boots on the ground. And so you're talking about an exchange of fire. Iran, they would say, we would take down the Strait of Hormuz. We would destroy, quote unquote, the Quislings, as Mark likes to call them, basically these vassal governments, Arab governments. So
our economy would go to hell. Hell.
Yeah. The oil price will go to like $1,000. It'd be insane. It would be insane.
He's threatening Iran, but to me, you can't do that, because Iran's already said we don't want any trouble. But if this goes bad, and you already know, if a war with Iran starts, how do you get out of it? How do you get out of it? And Trump said you're gambling with World War III. Well, Iran's friends with Russia and China. You go to Russia and China. Let me add this. Russia just signed this deal with Iran where they've got this alliance where they pretty much said, if Iran gets into a war, it'll be like Ukraine for us. We'll supply them with everything up until we won't have troops there, but we'll have lots of other stuff. And guess what? We don't have any way to stop the stuff they're using against Ukraine. So they got S-400s. We fly our ship. Well, great. We're going to fly missions in Iran. And the planes start getting shot down and our bases start blowing up. What are we going to do? Go to nuclear weapons? What are we, you know what I mean? What are we going to do? Include Israel? Now this country is going to come unglued, because you got a lot of people in this country that say we're in a war for Israel. You know what would happen? It would be the end of Donald Trump's presidency.
Yes.
As quick as we started, if he went to war with Iran, the economy, all of these plans he had, I may not agree with them, but he had his economic plans. The hell out the window with those, because it would be trying to survive with gas being $12, $14 a gallon if we're lucky, if you could get any at the gas station.
Yeah.
Our economy would then crash. Europe's economy would crash, and he would look like the biggest fool in history, and that would be the end. And 4 weeks into, if he attacked Iran, bombed Iran, did whatever, 4 weeks into his presidency would effectively end as a result of Israel. His coalition would turn on him and say, damn, man, you only went 4 weeks and you turned into Biden. be disastrous for the country, because there are people who looked at our country and said, we're nothing but a war machine monster. I've had it. And then Trump would get in. And some people thought, oh, he'll get out of war. Well, okay, maybe a little naive there, but they didn't think he'd take us down that path. So he's threatening it. Yeah, you may bomb Iran or attack Iran. You end your presidency. The other thing about apparently the Houthis are already firing back with missiles and drones at U.S. ship. Right? I was reading something that it said they've had some battle again that's gone on for hours. Right? Okay. So what do you strike back? So now you hit them yesterday, they're going to fire back. You hit them tonight, they're going to fire back. You're now at a war with Yemen, where every single day our people are flying bombing missions against them, and every single day they're firing missiles. That is a war. Yeah. Donald Trump, what he's effectively doing, if he's going to, every time the Yemen fires, he's going to fire back, is he's got us in a war with Yemen, because they're going to fire back every day. And some of our ships are going to get the hell knocked out of them sooner or later by one or two of those missiles. And then what? Up the war? They ain't going to stop. They're never going to stop.
If they take down a carrier, then what? That's why they keep taking it back and forth, because they're worried that one of those things is going to get hit. At some point. No, you're right. The issue is the war, in the war. Meaning go through the ceasefire, allow, and I wish Witkoff effectively did exactly what he did. Basically, whatever happened with Zelensky, Netanyahu needs to get Zelensky treatment. He does. I mean, because otherwise you need to end this, and you're dealing with somebody who does not want to end the conflict, who does not want to attend to the ceasefire deal at all. And so it's the issue, it's the ceasefire. Get the ceasefire, they stop firing missiles. They're very clear on their reasons on why they're doing it.
Yeah, look, here's the thing. You're wrong, because, and you're dead wrong on that. I mean, Trump's dead wrong on this for this reason. Israel, why are the Houthis doing this? Because Israel said we're not going to allow electricity and water and the things that people need to survive in. Well, then why are the Houthis wrong? That's illegal under international law. That's like genocidal. That's crimes against humanity. So what Trump is effectively doing is using military force to defend crimes against humanity.
Yes.
And dragging us into another war that we're not supposed to be in. And guess what? Again, he's dragging himself into a quagmire. The quagmire is every time you bomb us, you fire some missiles at us, we're going to bomb you. Well, that means that as far as the Ansar Allah, the Houthis are concerned, that means, well, fine. That's kind of what we've been doing all along. Why should this be any different? We're just going to keep doing it. You can keep bombing us. It don't matter. We're not going to stop firing them. It's not going to happen. And then now Trump's threatening Iran. So what? What do you do? Do you really have the wherewithal to fire on Iran, having no idea how far they might take it? You get the last word.
I absolutely agree. I mean, these are threats. Hopefully, he's not stupid enough to go through with these threats against Iran. Also, it's a bit rich coming out of the U.S. after we spent $300 billion in Ukraine, where we're telling another country who they can and can't support. So that, that's fantastic. He needs to end the war. Do what he said he was going to do to the Muslim community. I'm going to end this conflict. Okay? End the conflict. Get your Nobel Peace Prize, as he keeps saying he wants, or as people believe he wants. In the war in Ukraine, in the war in Israel and Palestine, call it a day in both, and be willing to take a bit of heat to do so in both conflicts. And I'm saying this is definitely for the Israeli one, because that's the one where you need to put a glove, a hard glove, an iron fist, in order to say, this is what we're going to do. No, you're not going to screw up the ceasefire. This is what we're going to do. If he ends it, they stop doing that, meaning you're not going to get them to stop. They've been bombed for years. The bombing has not stopped them from continuing either the fight with Saudi Arabia, or for that matter, this fight in the Red Sea, where they're trying to put pressure on shipping lanes. Bombing hasn't stopped them. You can get a deal with them, but the deal is ceasefire. So
He needs a
Trump,
lot of ceasefires, doesn't he? And I'm looking on Press TV, and here's what they got. Two things. I end with this. Yemenis to Trump will confront escalation with military escalation and general mobilization. So the Yemen says, if you want to fight, in fact, if I'm not mistaken, I remember Caleb Maupin saying they view right now their original leader, something that Al-Houthi preached years ago in a sermon, and he said that God would bless us, that we would be able to go to war with the United States and Israel. And they see this as the prophecy, right? They see this as a fulfillment of their prophecy that one day that they would be blessed to go to war. You don't want to fight people like that. And what are they saying? The prophecy is here. So what are they going to believe? They're going to believe that they will be blessed by God to victory, right? So every time you escalate, they're going to say their prayers and they're going to escalate, right? They're going to pray, thank you, Allah, for giving us this, that, and this, and helping us, and for this, what we were told to come true. The blessing has come to us. Now let's hit the Yankees again. And that's all you're going to go back. And also, Iran vows decisive response to any act of aggression after you. So everybody's saying to Trump, you throw punches, we throw punches. We can keep doing this forever. Can you? He's just digging him. We shall see. Jamarl Thomas, everybody, don't forget, go to Jamarl's website. Go to his YouTube page. If you are a member of my YouTube, if you're a subscriber, at least to my YouTube channel and not his, become a subscriber to his, and vice versa. So everybody, you can check out all of our good stuff. He's on every Monday through Friday from 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. with all kinds of great guests. I watch him every morning. You see the little join button. If you can click there and join, become a member, you can help out the channel. Follow me on Rockfin. Follow me on Rumble. Follow me on Telegram. And certainly we have Patreon. We got Buy Me a Coffee, PayPal, and Cash App, and all that stuff. How can they donate to your channel, Jamarl?
same thing. Either PayPal, Patreon, Super Chats, memberships, all those things are great. Let me just give credit to a few members. Name That Taco, shout out to you. Thank you very much. Also, Führer von der Leyen, this is funny. The EU is looking at commandeering 10 trillion euros in savings of Europeans once the digital euro goes into effect for the purpose of the European military operations. 1984 has arrived in Brussels. Yeah, Führer von der Leyen. There's the other one named Natako. It says, these combos are easy. Oh, easily my favorite. It's like sitting and watching a wise uncle and a cool older cousin talk about the world. Great analysis, y'all. Well, thank you for that, Taco. And Matthew says, question, could the Europeans just march in after any peace regardless? Then, no. Yeah, I don't buy it either.
They got like 20,000, 30,000 troops, and the Russians got a 1 million man army. Now.
Yeah, I don't buy it. I don't buy them putting troops in either. I don't buy it. I think those troops will get massacred.
Yeah.
Thank you.
10 trillion euros. Where are they going to get those from? They don't have the money, and they don't even have the collateral to take loans against it. You know what? But this is a sad state of affairs for the Europeans. You know how they're looking into funding things? Taking the Russians' money. Think about that. Yeah. They're saying, does anybody have any money? Does anybody know? We're all broke as hell. What about you? Well, we got this money that the Russians left laying around. The Russians are the only people in Europe that actually have money. And they're holding on to Russian money because they're all broke. How bad does that make them? Look, Russia is funding its own side of the war. They're so broke, they want to take Russia's money in Europe to fund the other side of the war. Russia's rich enough to fund their war against Ukraine and fund Ukraine against themselves and still win the war, and the Europeans got buckets. That is embarrassing.
They're going to have to get their money up. When Trump decides, all right, sanctions over, we're done, they're going to have to get their money up.
No, they're done. Yeah, they are. They're going to have to cough it up. All right, dude. I am out of here. All right, everybody. Share this on all your social media platforms. I don't know about you. It's been a long weekend. I'm tired, dude. I am so tired. I'll talk to you. We're out.